The night was quiet. The city lights outside the apartment window were soft and far away. Earth had changed a lot in the last 5 years. Humans were no longer alone. The Galactic Exchange Program had brought different alien species to live among them. The goal was simple: learn from each other. Ethan never thought he would be chosen to share an apartment with an alien, but he was. His roommate was Lyra. Lyra was not human. Her skin had a faint silver tone under bright light. Her eyes were slightly larger than a human's, and they reflected light like glass. She moved with calm control, like every step was planned. She spoke English well, but her voice always sounded measured, like she was thinking 2 steps ahead. They had lived together for 3 months. There had been no problems. They respected each other's space, and they followed the program rules. No emotional attachment, no cultural interference, just observation and cooperation. That night, Ethan believed Lyra was at her night training session with other exchange members. She often left after dinner and returned late. It had become routine. Ethan finished his shower and stepped into the hallway of the small apartment. Steam followed him from the bathroom. His hair was still wet. He did not think much about it. He was alone. At least, he thought he was alone. He stepped into the hallway and froze. Lyra was standing there, not in her room, not outside, but in the hallway. She was completely still. Her silver eyes were fixed on him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan's mind went blank. His heart jumped. He had no towel, no clothes, nothing. He quickly stepped back, reaching for the bathroom door, but it was already too late. She had seen him. He expected shock. He expected her to turn away. He expected confusion. But Lyra did none of those things. She did not look away. She did not apologize. She did not show embarrassment. Instead, she observed. Her eyes moved slowly, carefully, like she was studying something important. Ethan grabbed a towel from the rack and wrapped it around himself quickly. His face burned red. "Lyra," he said, trying to sound calm. "You're home early." She tilted her head slightly. "Yes," she replied in her calm voice. Training session was canceled. Her eyes were still focused on him, even though he was now covered. The silence between them felt heavy. Something was different. Ethan noticed her expression had changed. It was subtle. And her breathing was slower than normal. Her eyes were slightly darker than usual. On her planet, emotions were not shown openly, but small signs could mean a lot. She stepped one small step forward. "Are all human males structured like you?" she asked. The question hit him harder than the situation itself. "What?" he asked. She blinked once, slowly. "I am asking about muscle density and skin tone. Is your body typical for your species?" Ethan did not know how to respond. This was not a normal conversation. His mind was still racing from the shock. "It's normal," he said carefully. "I guess." Lyra studied his face now, not his body. "When I observed you," she continued, "my instincts reacted." That word made Ethan's heart beat faster. "Reacted how?" he asked quietly. She paused. "In my species, the physical strength indicators are connected to protection ability. Heat output, muscle alignment, bone structure. These traits are valued." Ethan stared at her. "You mean you were analyzing me?" "Yes," she answered simply. "But my reaction was not only scientific." The hallway felt smaller. Ethan could not tell if he was nervous or confused. Lyra finally stepped back. "I apologize if this situation caused discomfort," she said calmly. "That was not my intention." But her eyes told a different story. There was curiosity there, and something else, something she did not fully understand herself. She turned and walked toward her room, but before entering, she stopped. "Ethan," she said without looking at him. "On my planet, when instincts respond this strongly, It usually means something important has begun. Then she entered her room and closed the door. Ethan stood alone in the hallway. The apartment was quiet again, but nothing felt normal. He leaned against the wall, trying to slow his breathing. It was supposed to be a simple accident, an embarrassing moment, but her reaction had not been normal. She had not seen shame, she had not seen weakness, she had seen strength and instinct. Ethan realized something then. For him, it was just an awkward mistake. For Lyra, it might have been something much bigger. And deep inside her room, Lyra stood still in the darkness. Her hand rested against her chest. Her heart rhythm was different than usual, stronger, faster. She replayed the moment in her mind, the human body, the heat, the structure. Her species trained to control instincts, but this one felt different, unexpected, dangerous. The night outside remained silent, but inside that small apartment, something had changed, and neither of them truly understood what that change would mean. The exchange program had rules. The Galactic Council had strict laws, but instincts did not follow rules, and this was only the beginning. The next morning did not feel normal. The apartment looked the same, the furniture had not moved, and the city outside still made its usual distant noise, but the air inside felt heavier. Ethan woke up early even though he had slept late. His mind kept replaying the moment in the hallway. He told himself it was just an accident. It meant nothing. But the way Lyra had looked at him did not feel like nothing. It felt intentional, controlled, and strangely focused. When he walked into the kitchen, he saw her already there, standing by the counter with a small tablet in her hand. She was reading something, but her eyes lifted the moment he entered. She did not smile. She did not look embarrassed. She simply observed him again, just like the night before. "Good morning, Ethan," she said in her calm voice. "Morning," he replied, trying to sound normal as he poured water into a glass. He could feel her attention on him even when he looked away. It was not aggressive, but it was steady. After a few seconds of silence, she placed the tablet down. "I have been studying human biological data," she said. Ethan almost choked on his water. "Why?" "Because my reaction last night requires explanation," she answered plainly. "In my species, it's when a visual stimulus causes elevated internal rhythm and increased thermal awareness, it signals a protective match response." He stared at her. "A what?" "A biological selection signal," she clarified. "It is not emotional. It is instinct." Ethan leaned against the counter, unsure if he should laugh or panic. "You're saying your body reacted to me like I'm some kind of candidate?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Your muscle distribution, bone alignment, and heat output are higher than average compared to other humans I have observed. My instincts recognized that immediately." Ethan felt heat rise to his face again, but this time it was not embarrassment. It was confusion, mixed with something else he could not name. "Lyra, humans don't work like that. We don't just look at someone and decide they're a match." "I am aware," she replied. "Humans prioritize emotional bonding before biological commitment. My species evolved differently. We bond based on strength indicators first. Emotion develops after safety is confirmed." The words were simple, but the meaning felt heavy. Ethan realized something important in that moment. When Lyra had seen him the night before, she had not seen a private human moment. She had seen data. She had seen survival traits, and her instincts had reacted faster than her training. "I did not intend to violate social boundaries," she continued, "but I also cannot ignore what my biology detected." Ethan looked at her carefully now. For the first time, he noticed small changes in her posture. Her shoulders were slightly tense, and her breathing was controlled but deeper than usual. She looked calm, but something inside her was clearly active. "So what happens now?" he asked. Lyra paused before answering. Normally, when my species experiences this response, distance is recommended until the signal weakens. And will it weaken? He asked quietly. She held his gaze. I do not know. The room fell silent again, but this silence felt different from the one in the hallway the night before. This one carried weight. Ethan realized that whatever had started was not simple attraction. It was biological programming from another world. He suddenly understood how little he knew about her species beyond official reports and public briefings. Later that day, Ethan left for work, but his focus was gone. He kept thinking about what she had said. Protective match response, strength indicators, bonding signals. These were not casual ideas. If her instincts were real and strong, then this situation could become a serious problem. The Galactic Exchange Program had strict rules about emotional influence between species. Even biological bonding could be considered interference. When Ethan returned home that evening, he noticed Lyra sitting in the living room instead of her usual position near the window. She looked deep in thought. As he stepped inside, her eyes lifted again, and this time there was no attempt to hide the intensity in her gaze. I attempted to suppress the response today, she said calmly. It did not decrease. Ethan felt a small knot form in his chest. You mean it's getting stronger? Yes. The word hung between them. She stood slowly and walked closer, stopping a few feet away. And she did not touch him. She did not cross the line. But her presence felt closer than before. Ethan, she said carefully, in my culture, ignoring a bond signal can cause internal imbalance. It is not dangerous, but it is uncomfortable. However, acting on it without consent is forbidden. He swallowed. And what would acting on it mean? It would mean acknowledging that my instincts selected you. The honesty in her voice was clear. There was no drama, no exaggeration, just fact. Ethan realized that for her, this was not romantic. It was serious. It was instinct and biology mixing in ways neither of them expected. He felt nervous, but he also felt something else. Curiosity. The apartment lights seemed dimmer that night. The distance between them felt smaller even when they stood apart. Both understood that something had shifted. And the accident in the hallway was not just embarrassment, it was a trigger. And now they were standing at the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. The days that followed did not return to normal. Instead, they settled into a strange new rhythm that neither Ethan nor Lyra openly discussed. On the surface, everything looked the same. They followed their schedules, shared meals, and respected each other's space. But underneath that calm routine, something had shifted. Ethan could feel it every time Lyra entered the same room. Her presence felt stronger now, more focused, like her awareness of him had sharpened. Lyra, on the other hand, was struggling in silence. Her species trained from a young age to control instinct responses. Emotional stability was considered a sign of intelligence and maturity. Yet what she had felt that night in the hallway had not faded. If anything, it had grown more defined. She could sense Ethan's body heat even from across the room. Human temperature levels were slightly higher than most species in the program, but Ethan's were above average even for a human male. Her internal systems registered it every time he moved closer. It was not desire in the human sense. It was recognition. One evening, as rain tapped lightly against the apartment windows, Lyra finally decided to explain more. Ethan was sitting at the table, scrolling through news updates on his tablet, when she approached and sat across from him. Her expression was serious but calm. There is more you should understand, she began. My species does not bond often. We are selective. When a bond signal activates, and it usually means our biological systems have identified long-term compatibility. Ethan lowered the tablet slowly. Compatibility for what exactly? For protection and reproduction, she answered plainly. But reproduction is secondary. Protection is primary. On my planet, survival required strong pair bonds. Our environment is unstable. Extreme climate shifts, large predators, and territorial conflicts made strength essential. Those who chose weak partners did not survive long. Ethan listened carefully. This was no longer just an awkward shared living situation. This was cultural and biological history shaping the present. So when you saw me, he said slowly, your instincts didn't just react randomly. No, she replied. They analyzed, they evaluated, they concluded. And what was the conclusion? He asked. Lyra met his eyes without hesitation. That you possess traits my biology recognizes as high survival value. The words felt heavy in the quiet room. Ethan had never thought of himself as extraordinary. He worked out occasionally, he stayed active, but he was just a regular human in a massive city. Yet to her, he represented something much more significant. I do not choose this lightly, she continued. My training tells me to suppress it because cross-species bonding complicates diplomacy, but my instincts are not designed to consider politics. Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing everything. Do you feel different around me now? He asked. Yes, she answered immediately. My awareness increases, my sensory focus sharpens, my protective reflex strengthens. Protective? He repeated. If I detect threat near you, my reaction time increases by 23%, she explained calmly. That is measurable. Ethan almost laughed, but he could see she was serious. So your body basically decided I'm yours to protect? It is more accurate to say my body decided we are stronger together, she corrected gently. That statement lingered in Ethan's mind long after the conversation ended. Stronger together. It sounded simple, but it carried deep meaning. He began noticing small changes in her behavior. When they walked outside, she subtly positioned herself closer to the street side. When crowded areas formed, she stood slightly in front of him. At first he thought it was coincidence, but now he understood. Her instincts were active. However, there was another side to it as well. Lyra was experiencing something new and confusing. My human presence affected her more than she expected. His voice tone, the rhythm of his breathing when he slept, even the sound of his footsteps created patterns her mind replayed. Her species did not often deal with emotional uncertainty, but this situation forced her to question her control. One night, as Ethan slept, Lyra remained awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. She analyzed the data repeatedly. Elevated heart rhythm when he was near, increased neural activity during conversation, heightened focus response. These were not temporary spikes, they were stable signals. For her species, stable signals meant long-term bonding. She stood and quietly stepped into the hallway, stopping outside Ethan's door. She did not enter, she simply listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was calm and slow. A human vulnerability during sleep triggered her protective instinct even more. She felt an urge to ensure no threat existed within range. It was not romantic. It was deeply biological. Inside, Ethan shifted slightly in his sleep, unaware of her presence. Lyra realized something important at that moment. Her instincts were no longer just reacting to physical structure. They were adapting to his behavior, his patterns, his existence. The next morning, she looked tired for the first time since arriving on Earth. Ethan noticed immediately. You didn't recharge properly, he said, concerned. No, she admitted. My systems were occupied. With what? Evaluating long-term outcomes, she replied. He studied her face carefully. And? She hesitated for the first time since the incident. And the data suggests this bond will not weaken. The rain outside had stopped, but the air still felt heavy. Ethan realized this was no temporary misunderstanding. Something real had begun, shaped by alien biology and human unpredictability. and neither of them truly knew what would happen if it continued to grow. What started as an accidental moment in a hallway had now become something much deeper. It was no longer about embarrassment or curiosity. It was about instinct fighting control, about biology crossing species lines, and about two beings standing at the edge of something that could change both their futures forever. The situation might have remained private between Ethan and Lyra if the world outside their apartment had stayed quiet. But the Galactic Exchange Program was never truly private. Every participant was monitored in small ways. Behavioral reports were submitted weekly. Emotional stability was measured through biometric devices. Cross-species influence was carefully studied. The purpose of the program was peace, not attachment. And attachment was exactly what Lyra's internal systems were beginning to form. 3 days after their last conversation, a message arrived from the regional Galactic office. It was not unusual for exchange members to receive updates, but this one was marked as a priority observation notice. Lyra read it in silence while Ethan watched her expression shift in subtle ways. Her posture straightened, her eyes grew sharper. "The Council is conducting random compatibility reviews," she said slowly. "Compatibility reviews?" Ethan repeated. "Yeah, they analyze behavioral changes in participants to ensure no cultural or biological interference is developing," she explained. "They will conduct in-person evaluations." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "When?" "Tomorrow." The words settled heavily between them. That evening, the apartment felt smaller than ever. Lyra sat quietly by the window, reviewing her internal logs. She had already considered the risk. Her biometric readings over the past week showed increased activity whenever Ethan was within close range. The Council's scanning devices would detect irregular patterns immediately. It was their job. Ethan paced slowly across the living room. "What happens if they think something is wrong?" he asked. Lyra answered without looking at him. "If they determine a bond is forming, I will be reassigned to a different sector or return to my home world." "And the bond?" he asked carefully. "It would be medically suppressed," she replied. "My species has neural dampening methods. They are effective." Ethan stopped walking. "Does it hurt?" She turned her head slightly toward him. "Emotionally, no. Biologically, it creates temporary instability. But it is survivable." The calm way she said it made it worse. To her, it was procedure. To him, it sounded like erasing something real. The next day, 2 representatives from the Galactic Council arrived at the apartment. They were taller than Lyra, with darker metallic skin and formal uniform markings across their shoulders. Their movements were precise and controlled. They greeted Ethan politely but with clear distance. And humans were still considered the experimental species in the program. The inspection began with standard questions: living conditions, dietary adaptation, cultural understanding. Ethan answered simply and honestly. Lyra responded in her usual measured tone. But when the representatives activated their scanning devices, the air in the room shifted. Small beams of blue light passed over both of them, measuring heart rate, neural activity, and hormonal fluctuations. One of the representatives paused while reviewing data on a floating display screen. His eyes moved slowly as he examined the readings. "Your internal rhythm shows sustained elevation over the past 72 hours, he said to Lyra. "That is correct," she answered calmly. "Cause?" She did not hesitate. "Environmental adjustment." The representative looked unconvinced, but did not argue. He turned to Ethan. "Have you noticed behavioral changes in your roommate?" Ethan felt the pressure of the question. Lyra stood perfectly still beside him. "She's been thinking a lot," he said carefully, "but nothing unusual." The representative studied him for a moment longer than necessary. Then he returned to the display. After several tense minutes, The devices powered down. "You will both submit additional logs for the next 7 cycles," the representative said. "If irregular patterns continue, reassignment will be considered." They left as quickly as they had arrived. The apartment door closed, and silence filled the space again. Ethan let out a breath he did not realize he was holding. "That was close," he muttered. Lyra remained standing in the center of the room. "They detected fluctuation," she said quietly, "but not confirmation." "So we're safe?" he asked. "For now." She walked slowly toward the table and placed her hand flat against its surface, as if grounding herself. Ethan could see tension in her shoulders that she had not shown during the inspection. "I do not wish to return," she said after a long pause. The statement surprised him. "Because of the program?" She looked at him directly. "Because of you." There was no dramatic tone, no emotional exaggeration, just truth. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Lyra, this is bigger than us. The council won't allow—" "I am aware of their rules," she interrupted gently, "but rules do not erase instinct. They only delay it." He stepped closer to her now, closing the distance slightly. "If they find out for sure, they'll force you to suppress it." "Yes." "And you'd let them?" Lyra hesitated. For the first time since they met, uncertainty showed clearly in her eyes. "I was trained to obey the council," she said softly, "but training does not prepare one for this." The weight of her words settled deeply between them. This was no longer just a biological reaction. It was a choice forming beneath it. Outside, the city continued as usual. Humans and aliens moved through streets unaware of the quiet struggle happening inside one small apartment. The exchange program was built on control and balance, but control was beginning to slip. Ethan realized something important in that moment. What had started as accidental exposure had now grown into something that threatened rules written across galaxies. The council was watching. The scans would continue. And if Lyra's bond signal kept strengthening, there would be consequences. But despite the risk, neither of them stepped away. And that choice, silent and unspoken, would change everything. The pressure from the council did not disappear after the inspection. If anything, it became heavier. Lyra submitted her required logs every cycle, carefully adjusting her wording to avoid drawing attention. She described her elevated internal rhythms as environmental adaptation and cultural proximity stress. Technically, she was not lying. Being near Ethan did create measurable changes in her system, but she avoided using the word bond. That word would trigger immediate intervention. Ethan tried to act normal, but the knowledge of constant monitoring sat in the back of his mind. The cameras were not placed inside the apartment, but biometric tracking devices worn by exchange members could not be removed without authorization. Lyra's device recorded neural activity patterns in real time. The council might not understand human emotions completely, but they understood data, and data rarely lied. 3 nights after the inspection, a powerful storm moved across the city. Lightning flashed across the sky, and heavy rain struck the windows. Around midnight, the power grid in their sector failed. The apartment lights flickered once and then went dark. Emergency lighting activated, casting soft red shadows across the walls. Ethan stepped out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" he called. "Yes," Lyra replied from the living room. She was standing near the window, watching the storm with unusual intensity. And the red light reflected faintly off her silver skin, making her look almost unreal. The darkness felt different from normal night. Without electricity, the city's noise faded. The building was quiet except for distant thunder. It felt isolated, cut off from the rest of the world. Ethan walked closer, stopping a few feet away from her. "Backup systems should restore in an hour," he said. Lyra did not respond immediately. Instead, she turned slowly toward him. In the dim red light, Her eyes seemed deeper, more focused. Without the bright overhead lights and daily distractions, the space between them felt smaller, more personal. "The council sent another message," she said quietly. Ethan's stomach tightened. "What did it say?" "They have detected sustained neural synchronization patterns when I am within close proximity to you. They have scheduled a secondary evaluation." "When?" he asked. "2 cycles from now." He exhaled slowly. "So they're almost sure?" "Yes." The storm outside grew louder, thunder shaking the building slightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The darkness made it easier to admit things that daylight made difficult. "I can request reassignment before the evaluation," Lyra said at last. "Voluntary transfer reduces suspicion." Ethan felt a sharp reaction in his chest. "And you just leave?" "It would prevent forced dampening procedures," she explained. "If I leave voluntarily, they will not suppress my neural bond response. It will fade naturally over time." The idea of her leaving felt heavier than he expected. In just a few weeks, she had become more than a roommate. She had become a presence, steady and intelligent. Someone who challenged him to think differently about strength and connection. "Would it really fade?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Based on historical data, cross-species bond signals rarely disappear completely. They weaken, but a trace remains." Lightning flashed across the room, illuminating both of them briefly. In that bright second, Ethan saw something he had not seen before. Fear. Not fear of the council, not fear of punishment, fear of losing something important. "You don't want to go," he said softly. Lyra's composure shifted. It was small, but real. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and her breathing deepened. "No," she admitted. The word hung in the air between them. The red emergency lights hummed quietly. The storm outside continued. But inside the apartment, everything felt still. "When I saw you that night," she continued slowly, "I believed it was only instinct. I believed it would stabilize and return to baseline levels. But it has not." She stepped closer, closing half the distance between them. "My species bonds rarely. When we do, it is for life. It is not based on temporary desire. It is based on long-term compatibility and survival probability." "And you think that's what this is?" Ethan asked. She met his gaze directly. "Yes." Her honesty made it impossible to look away. "My instincts did not choose you randomly," she continued. "They responded to your strength markers, yes, but they have adapted to your behavior as well. Your protective tendencies, your emotional responses, your decision-making patterns." Ethan swallowed. "Hey, so it's not just about what you saw." "No," she said firmly. "It is about who you are." The storm's noise softened slightly as the rain began to slow. The darkness around them felt less threatening now, more intimate. "If I leave," Lyra said quietly, "my systems will adjust. I will survive, but I will always recognize that I moved away from a confirmed bond." "And if you stay?" he asked. "I risk council intervention, possible removal, possible suppression." The choice was clear and dangerous. Ethan stepped closer until only a small space remained between them. He could feel her warmth now, subtle but real. "Lyra, I don't fully understand your biology, but I know this much. Running away because of rules doesn't feel right." Her eyes softened slightly. "Humans make decisions based on emotion." "Maybe," he replied. "But sometimes emotion tells us what matters." Silence followed, not uncomfortable, but heavy with meaning. Finally, Lyra reached up and placed her hand lightly against her own chest, where her heart rhythm was strongest. "When I am near you, this accelerates. It is measurable. It is undeniable." Ethan placed his hand gently over his own chest. "Mine does too." The emergency lights flickered once more as power began restoring to parts of the building. White light slowly returned to the apartment, pushing away the red shadows. Lyra lowered her hand but did not step back. "I will not request reassignment," she said calmly. Ethan felt relief and fear at the same time. "Then we face it together." She nodded once. "Yes, together." The storm outside had passed, but a new one was forming beyond their walls. The council would not ignore continued irregular readings. The second evaluation would be stricter, but in that quiet moment, neither of them stepped away. What began as a simple accident had grown into a conscious choice, and choices, unlike instincts, carried consequences. The two cycles passed faster than Ethan expected. Every moment felt sharper, more defined, as if both of them understood that something permanent was approaching. Lyra continued submitting her logs, but she stopped trying to lower her internal readings artificially. She had made her decision during the storm. She would not request reassignment. She would not step away before the council forced her to. If there were consequences, she would face them directly. The morning of the second evaluation arrived with clear skies and cold air. The city looked calm, almost peaceful, which made the tension inside the apartment feel even stronger. Ethan noticed that Lyra's movements were precise, but slower than usual. She was not afraid, but she was preparing herself mentally. For her species, important decisions were not made emotionally. They were accepted with full awareness of outcome probability. When the council representatives arrived again, there were 3 of them this time. Their uniforms carried higher-ranking insignia. This was no longer a routine check. It was confirmation. The lead representative spoke in a neutral tone. "Lyra of Sector 7, your neural patterns indicate sustained cross-species synchronization beyond acceptable parameters. You will undergo immediate assessment." Ethan stood beside her, unable to hide his frustration. "She's not malfunctioning," he said. She's just adapting." The representative's gaze shifted to him briefly. "Human adaptation is expected. Bond formation is not." Scanning devices activated once more, but this time the analysis lasted longer. Blue light passed over Lyra repeatedly, measuring her neural activity in real time while Ethan stood within close range. The results appeared instantly on floating displays. The representative did not look surprised. "Bond signal confirmed," he stated calmly. "Intensity level stable and increasing." The words felt final. Lyra did not deny it. She did not argue. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly and spoke in her steady voice. "Confirmation accepted." The representative continued. "You are aware of protocol. Neural dampening procedure will suppress the bond and restore baseline function. You may then continue participation in the exchange program." Ethan's chest tightened. "You're going to erase it?" "It is not erasure," the representative corrected. "It is stabilization." Lyra remained silent for several seconds, processing the option. Ethan could see the internal conflict behind her controlled expression. This was not simply about feelings. For her species, bonds were life markers. To suppress one was not just a medical act. It was a decision to reject a biological truth. "What if she refuses?" Ethan asked. The representative's voice remained calm. "Refusal results in program removal and immediate return to home sector. Continued proximity to the human subject will not be permitted." The room felt smaller again, like it had during the first inspection. But this time, the choice was clear and unavoidable. Lyra finally spoke. "If I accept dampening, will the bond signal be permanently erased?" "It will be reduced below measurable threshold," the representative answered. "And if I return home?" "You will be reassigned. Distance will weaken the signal naturally." Lyra turned her head slightly toward Ethan. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, something unspoken passed between them. Fear was there, yes, but also certainty. For the first time since she arrived on Earth, Lyra did something unexpected. She stepped closer to Ethan instead of maintaining formal distance. The scanning devices immediately registered a spike in her readings. "Your neural intensity is increasing," the representative observed. "Yes," she replied calmly, "because proximity strengthens it." The representative narrowed his eyes slightly. "You are demonstrating instability." "No," she corrected gently. "I am demonstrating choice." Silence filled the room. "My species values survival and strength," she continued. "My instincts selected this human based on measurable criteria. Over time, my cognitive evaluation confirmed compatibility beyond biology. This is not random fluctuation. It is alignment." The representative's expression remained neutral, but his tone hardened slightly. "You are prioritizing personal alignment over diplomatic structure." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. Ethan felt his heart pounding. He had never seen her so direct with authority. She was not emotional. She was decisive. "Lyra of Sector 7, the representative said slowly. "State your decision." The air felt heavy. Lyra took a steady breath. "So I refuse neural dampening." The statement echoed in the quiet apartment. The representatives did not react dramatically. They simply adjusted their displays. "Then you will be removed from the exchange program and return to your homeworld within one cycle." Ethan's voice came out before he could stop it. "You're just taking her away?" "She has chosen removal," the representative replied. Lyra turned fully toward Ethan now. Her voice softened slightly, but her posture remained strong. "Distance does not erase alignment," she said quietly, "but it may protect you from political consequence." "I don't care about politics," Ethan replied. She gave the smallest hint of a smile. "I know." The representatives powered down their devices and prepared to leave. "Transport will arrive tomorrow," the lead representative stated. Prepare accordingly." When the door closed behind them, silence returned once more. But this silence felt different from before. It was not uncertainty anymore. It was final. Ethan looked at her, struggling to find words. "You're really going?" "For now," she said calmly. "For now?" he repeated. "My species does not abandon confirmed bonds easily," she replied. "Distance weakens signal strength, but it does not erase memory. If alignment remains after separation, I will have grounds to request independent reassignment." "You'd come back?" he asked. She stepped closer again, this time without fear of scanners. "If the bond remains, yes." Ethan felt a mix of pride and sorrow. She had chosen instinct over command, biology over politics, him over comfort. "You gave up your position," he said quietly. "No," she corrected. I chose my position." The sun outside began to set, casting soft light through the window. For the first time since the accident in the hallway, the path ahead was clear. It was not easy, it was not safe, but it was chosen. What began as embarrassment had grown into defiance. What started as instinct had become commitment, and the next day would decide whether distance could truly weaken what had already changed both of them forever. The final morning arrived quietly. There were no storms, no sudden power failures, no dramatic alarms. The city moved as it always did, unaware that something important was ending inside one small apartment. Ethan woke before sunrise, unable to sleep any longer. The reality of the situation felt heavy in his chest. Today, Lyra would leave. The transport vessel would arrive within hours. After that, and the apartment would return to being just walls and furniture instead of shared presence and quiet conversations. Lyra was already awake when he stepped into the living room. She stood near the window, watching the early light spread across the skyline. Her posture was steady, but there was a softness in her expression that had not been there months ago when she first arrived on Earth. Back then, she had observed the planet like a scientist studying data. Now she looked at it like someone memorizing a place she might not see again. "The transport signal has been confirmed," she said calmly without turning around. "Arrival in 42 minutes. Ethan nodded slowly. He did not trust his voice yet. The room felt different already, like it knew change was coming. They spent the next half hour speaking quietly about simple things. Human food preferences. Cultural misunderstandings they had laughed about weeks earlier. The first day she had arrived and analyzed his bookshelf as if it were an archaeological discovery. None of it sounded dramatic. It sounded normal. But beneath the normal words was something much deeper. When the sky above the city shifted and a faint shimmer appeared in the distance, Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The transport vessel hovered silently several stories above street level, almost invisible except for the distortion in the air around it. It did not land. It did not need to. A narrow beam of light extended toward the building's upper levels. Lyra turned to face him fully now. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was full of meaning. "I have calculated the probability of signal retention after separation," she said softly. "There is a 62% chance the bond will remain active at measurable levels." Ethan managed a small smile. "You're still thinking in percentages." "It is how my species finds comfort," she replied. He stepped closer to her, close enough to feel the warmth she always carried. "You don't have to talk like a report right now." Her eyes held his steadily. "Then I will speak without calculation." The words that followed were simple, but they carried more weight than anything she had said before. "When I saw you that night, I believed it was only biology. Now I understand it was also choice. I choose this bond." Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. "I choose it too." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly and carefully, Lyra reached out. This time, there were no scanners watching, no council representatives measuring neural spikes. Her hand touched his for the first time since they had met. The contact was light, but powerful. A small surge passed through her system instantly. She could feel it. The bond signal flared stronger than ever. "Signal intensity rising," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Confirmed." Ethan laughed softly despite the sadness in his chest. "Good." The beam of light from the transport vessel brightened slightly, signaling that time was nearly over. Lyra released his hand but did not step back immediately. "Distance will test this," she said. "But distance does not erase alignment. If the signal remains, I will petition for independent placement on Earth without council restriction." "And if they refuse?" he asked. Then I will continue requesting," she answered calmly. "My species is persistent." The faintest smile touched Ethan's face again. "So am I." The beam of light extended fully into the apartment now, forming a soft column near the window. It hummed quietly, waiting. Lyra took one final look around the apartment. The table where they had argued about cultural differences. The hallway where everything had started. The small kitchen where ordinary mornings had slowly turned extraordinary. "Everything changed because of one moment," she said quietly. "Not because of exposure, because of recognition." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, everything changed." She stepped backward into the edge of the beam. The light surrounded her gently but did not pull her yet. She looked at him one last time. "Humans believe strength is physical," she said. "Oh, but I have learned it is also emotional. You stood beside me against the council. That confirms my original selection." Before Ethan could respond, the beam brightened. Lyra's form shimmered slightly as the transport engaged. In a matter of seconds, she was gone. The light disappeared, and the sky above the city returned to normal. The apartment felt empty immediately. Ethan stood still for a long time, staring at the space where she had been. The silence felt louder now. He walked slowly to the window and looked out at the city, trying to imagine where she was heading. Another world, another sky. Hours passed. The day moved forward. But something inside him remained steady. It did not feel broken. It felt connected. Far beyond Earth's atmosphere, inside the transport vessel. Lyra stood in a quiet chamber as stars moved past the viewing panels. She closed her eyes briefly and focused inward. Even across increasing distance, her internal readings showed stable bond activity. The signal had not weakened yet. She allowed herself a small, private smile. Distance would test them. The Council would resist. Her species would question her choice. But instinct and decision had aligned, and that alignment had already changed everything. What began as an accident in a hallway had grown into defiance against authority, into understanding between species, into a bond neither science nor politics could easily erase. For Ethan, the apartment would never feel the same again. For Lyra, Earth would never be just another assignment. And somewhere between two planets, a connection remained active, steady, and waiting for the next chapter.